Good morning, everyone. I'm Constable Tanya Vizentine, Media Relations Officer for the Vancouver Police. I'd like to welcome everyone for coming this morning to hear the Vancouver Police Department's Deputy Chiefs speak about the department's update on hate crimes in our city. This morning, we will hear from Deputy Chief Constable Chow and Deputy Chief Constable Rankin. Following them, we will hear from Ms. Queenie Chu, the CEO of Success. All three speakers will be available to answer questions from both everyone in the room and on our phone lines. In addition, we have been joined by other community partners who Deputy Chow will introduce. They will also be available for questions or comments after the news conference. So how it'll go is we will first take questions from media in the room, and then we will move to our phone lines. And for those that are listening on the phone lines, we have emailed a copy of the news release in relation to today's news conference. It should be in your inboxes. For questions pertaining to anything else going on in the city, I'm happy to answer questions or clip for you later once this news conference is finished. I would now like to welcome Deputy Chief Constable Chow to the podium.
Thank you, Tanya. So, good morning. I just want to make a few introductions first, and Councillor Sarah Kirby-Young, who's back there, and many of you know her in the room, strong advocate for the Chinese community. She's very outspoken on anti-racism, on hate crimes. You've probably seen her in the media or been part of it, where she's been at events advocating for the Chinese community, so thank you for joining us. Also want to introduce a number of community people, so thank you for being here today. Ms. Queenie Chu, right over here, she's the CEO of Success, largest nonprofit social organization in our province. They play a huge role in advocating for multiculturalism, diversity, and inclusion. Mr. Jordan Ng, where are you, Jordan? There he is, sorry. Hey, Jordan. So he's the president of the Vancouver Chinatown Business Improvement Association. The BIA works with police to help keep businesses in Chinatown safe, and while working to improve the economic vitality of the area. Mr. Jordan Ng, right over here, is the vice president of the Chinese Benevolent Association. So the CBA promotes equality for the Chinese Canadians and fosters better understanding with other community groups. Mr. Fred Kwok is right over here, and he's the board chair for the Chinese Cultural Center, which fosters Chinese culture, art within the Chinese community and with other cultural groups. The center also helps Chinese immigrants adjust to life in Canada. And finally, Ms. Penny Tam with the Vancouver Chinatown Foundation. The foundation works to build a more resilient and inclusive community by promoting the well-being of those in need while preserving Chinatown's cultural heritage. So I want to thank all of you for your continued engagement with the Vancouver Police Department and for your commitment alongside the VPDs to put an end to the recent racist incidents that we've seen in Vancouver. And I encourage everybody in the room afterwards. I know we're only asking Queenie Chu just in the interest of time to speak afterwards, but please speak with some of these community leaders so they can give you some context and through their eyes and lens of what the Chinese community has been going through for the past 3 months. So earlier this year, after the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, we identified a disturbing trend, an increase in anti-Asian hate crime and hate-related incidents. I'm saddened, disturbed and disappointed to report that despite police efforts, despite engagement with community and public concern and outrage, this trend continues in the city. So far in 2020, the VPD has identified 77 hate-associated police files. This is up from 51 for the same time in 2019. And this increase is driven largely by an increase in anti-Asian incidents. Here are some staggering numbers, and these are the ones I would like you to focus on. To this date, there are 29 anti-Asian files being investigated by the police, compared to only 4 in the same time last year. So that's an 8-fold increase that we're looking at. In addition to this, there are another 10 active files from April and May that we're currently investigating or looking at that could eventually be classified as hate-related files in the coming days or weeks. The victims in all of these cases have been people of Asian descent. And based on the information collected, in most instances, we believe offenders were attempting to target people of East Asian descent specifically. The Vancouver Police have initiated several measures to help combat the increase in hate crime and incidents in Vancouver. Deputy Chief Rankin, in a short bit, will talk to you about what he's doing in the investigative divisions. And for me, on the operations side, here's some of the steps we've taken. So we've increased the contact with the Chinese community, and it's important to ensure the community members are aware of what constitutes a hate crime and how they can reach out to the police. We've also developed a pamphlet in Chinese that explains the different ways community members can connect with police officers. Our district commander for Chinatown, Inspector Lynn Noftel, has increased police presence in the area, so we've poured in resources into the Chinatown area. Our officers are on foot, beat officers, and they provide a very visible presence to deter crime. But more importantly, they're there to reassure and support the community. In addition, we've placed public safety cameras in Chinatown and other locations in the city. Essentially, they're like Google cameras that go down and they're pointing in all different directions. They're 24/7. They're recording the activities of what's going on in that area as it relates to high violent crime areas and/or incidents like this. We've also increased our community safety officer presence in Chinatown, and we've worked with our partners at ECOM to ensure all calls that come in with bias or prejudice type overtones are assigned and investigated, even though they may not be criminal in nature. So moving forward, we're working to reduce barriers that may exist for reporting. We're developing a system that will allow victims to report non-emergency incidents in Chinese. And what's been particularly hurtful is the hateful vandalism we have seen to prominent landmarks in Chinatown, and that being the Chinese Cultural Center and the Millennium Gate Lion's Head. Vancouver's historic Chinatown was established over 100 years ago in the 1800s. It's an area that truly helps define our city, and it's especially upsetting to see this crime occurring in an area with such cultural significance. I've been encouraged and inspired to see how the community, business leaders, and government officials have all rallied together to step up and strongly condemn racist behaviors. They've put their support behind our vibrant Asian communities. Hate is insidious. Right now, it's anti-Asian, but it spreads like a virus and impacts us all. These incidents and crime cause additional stress and fear in the community during an uncertain time already. And I really want to leave you with 3 messages. To the public who witness a hate incident, don't be silent, speak up, stand up in support, report hate crimes. To the offender, half of our residents in Vancouver are culturally diverse. They're not a minority, it's who we are. Know that we're all watching, and know that the VPD will heavily resource these incidents to expose, identify, investigate, and arrest you. And most importantly, to the victims, Vancouver is a safe city, and if you are the victim of a crime, the police want to hear from you. We will help you. Please reach out.警方好重視你個錯案，有時希望你報警。Thank you.
Thank you, Howard. I'd like to express my thanks and appreciation for the community leaders who are here today. Police and community partnerships are essential to maintaining public safety and increasing trust and confidence. We greatly value our relationships with you and want to continue to work with you to ensure the safety of our communities. I'm here today for a couple of reasons. I want to provide an investigative update on the hate crimes that we've seen in recent months, and I have some progress from our detectives to report. At first, I want to reassure the residents of this city and members of the Chinese community that combating this disturbing trend is a top priority for me and for my investigators. Criminal investigations are often complex. Regardless of the complexity or severity, however, criminal investigations are a time-consuming process. Both Deputy Chow and I support our frontline officers and detectives in their continued meticulous and calculated work to ensure successful outcomes of the investigations. As a society, we can sometimes have unrealistic expectations of how investigations unfold based on how they're portrayed on television and in the movies. For example, even when we have a suspect identified by the public in a photo, police still need to build a case beyond surveillance video or stills. The video and photographs alone are not enough. This often requires police to expend significant time conducting witness and video canvassing, collecting victim and witness statements, which are then required to be transcribed, proofed, and summarized, establishing suspect identification through photo pack presentations to witnesses, collection and analysis of forensic evidence in the form of fingerprints, DNA, and video, and surveillance resources to locate and arrest a suspect. In BC, when police pursue criminal charges, they provide evidence that they have collected over the course of their investigation in a report to Crown Counsel. Crown reviews the evidence and determines if it meets the threshold for charge approval. Only after all the necessary follow-up is completed by police may criminal charges be laid. As Deputy Chow has mentioned, the VPD is investigating 29 different crimes with a hate element for the months of March, April, and May. Of these 29 files, 19 are assigned to investigators within my division. If it has an element of violence, it's assigned to the robbery assault unit. If it's involving vandalism or mischief, it's assigned to the property crime unit that falls under my purview. So these offenses range from racial slurs and vandalism to assaults. Their suspects have been identified in 6 investigations that are near completion, and I anticipate will be submitted to Crown Counsel for their review. The remaining files have been concluded at this time as there is no suspect or evidence that would lead to the identification of a suspect. This does not eliminate the possibility that these files could be reactivated at a later date should the evidence come to light. At the Vancouver Police Department, we have a hate crimes investigator within our Diversity, Inclusion, and Indigenous Relations section that track all hate crimes within the city and liaise with my division. This investigator works with our Operations Division to support frontline officers who take the initial call and then works directly with detectives in the Investigation Division. In addition to liaising with patrol members and detectives, our hate crime investigator maintains close contact with community groups and monitors local, national, and international situations or events that could increase hate crimes in the city of Vancouver. When determining if an incident is a hate crime, investigators will look at a variety of factors, including comments made during the offense, such as racial slurs. More recently, we are also looking at comments made in relation to COVID-19. We don't need a direct physical assault for investigators to initiate an investigation as a potential hate crime. In closing, I want to say that, like Deputy Chow, I'm very disturbed by the sudden increase we've seen in hate crimes and incidents in Vancouver that coincides with the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. For police agencies in larger cities around the world, this type of increase may not seem significant. However, after being a police officer now for 34 years, I can tell you for our city this is significant. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Queenie Chu, CEO of Success, one of the largest nonprofit organizations in serving new Canadians, seniors, and affordable housing. It is our job as people, as parents, as citizens of British Columbia and Canadians to combat bigotry and xenophobia wherever we can. It is a growing concern across Canada, a rise in bigotic behavior towards minority of racial and religious backgrounds. Before the threat of COVID-19 become a daily concern in our lives, agonizing behavior towards Canadians and newcomers of Asian heritage, as well as those people who may practice other religious beliefs, had already become an increasing disruption to our communities. When COVID-19 began to spread, a rise in incidents of shameful behavior blaming minorities did as well. Recently, many elected officials expressed their concern. I'm so glad Councillor Sarah Kirby-Yung is here to also lend her support in this. Has been raising the issue about racist behaviors towards Asians and other minorities. Further, we heard from Deputy Chow talking about the drastic increase in hate crimes in the first part of our 2020. Examples including recent despicable attack against a 92-year-old Asian man and also racially motivated assault against women, in a SkyTrain or actually at a bus stop, or, attack towards a First Nation woman who was mistaken to Asian. Let me be very clear about this disgraceful behavior. This conduct is unwarranted. It is divisive, and it is unacceptable to how we define ourselves as Canadians. It also reminds us that much work needs to be done to further community understanding so that all Canadians will better recognize that a diverse community means it is resilient and stronger community. At Success, we have taken active role in supporting greater inclusion in our communities through our strong advocacy and education programs. We call on all communities to stand in solidarity against any divisive behavior, whether it is racially motivated or agonizing against faith-based or community-based organizations. We encourage our communities to report, just like Deputy Chow said, any and all bigotic, stigmatizing, and also divisive behavior to the local and national authorities. In closing, thank you to the VPD for your diligence and commitment ensuring the safety and security of all of us in the community. Let's charter this course together. Thank you.
Thank you. We're happy to take any questions that you might have of us.
Can you just tell us how many cases happened last month? Because I think there were 11 reported in April, and now you're saying April and May, there's only...
Yeah, I'm going to ask you if you can talk to Tanya afterwards, and she can give you a better breakdown.
Okay.
Yeah, I just don't have those numbers offhand. But I can tell you a lot of these files, they start off innocuous enough, and people will report them thinking it's nothing, and the more we dig into it, then it turns out there's a hate crime element to it, and then it converts over. So it could be somebody decides, hey, I'm not going to report until I hear it on the news a month later, and that also factors into some number changes.
Okay. We reached out after last month's news conference about this second surge to 24 divisions and municipal forces asking if they're seeing something similar. Vast majority said they don't have data showing the same thing. Many, or a handful, said they're investigating really concerning crimes that are similar and COVID related. Do you think it's a matter of, like you said, really drilling down and parsing the data like VPD appears to have done?
I know it is, yes. It's a good question, and it is. It's important that, we've had a hate crime investigator that really is the pointy end, but has access to all the resources in Deputy Rankin's investigative division. But it's finding out the information. We've got a hate crime investigators that tracking any trends that develop, and it's not a second wave. That first wave hasn't stopped. This has been going on since post-COVID. I think some 90% of the incidents we're talking about happened after COVID, after the pandemic was announced. So it's all part and parcel. And it's not just something endemic to here in Vancouver. We're hearing other centers back east, across North America that are also experiencing this. And I think intuitively, you're reading stories about it and you know that this is taking place. But I can tell you that we track all these sorts of developments and we've been tracking these trends. And that's why we're here giving you this sort of a response, because it is concerning to us.
What do you say about that disconnect between all the anecdotal evidence, which is everywhere, and then the stats that police are keeping? Do you think it's a matter of forces not drilling down and actually getting a handle on the cases from recent weeks? How does that...
Yeah, I could talk to Vancouver's numbers, and I could say that there's always going to be that component. You're always going to have that dark figure because there's that element or that segment that will not report these crimes. And it may be certain barriers that make it difficult for them to report these crimes. And that's why we've done a number of these initiatives. But I can say that, this is something that we should not be hiding behind, because as much as there may be concerns about copycatters, what I'm more concerned about is the fact that there may be victims at home that are fearful of going out on the street, that are worried about being harmed, and aren't reporting this to the police. That's even of more concern to me, and that's why it's so important that we get this out.
Question about classification. Attacks on non-Asians, but COVID-related, such as that attack on the Indigenous women, you still classify that as anti-Asian hate crime, or?
For the purpose of this investigation, we are. But that's about all I can comment about that matter. It is under investigation, but because it was directed at an individual who was mistaken for being East Asian, but they weren't, that makes no difference to us. It's still a race-based attack.
Can you shed some light on progress in terms of the investigations on the recent cases?
Well, I can't shed light on recent cases or specific cases. What I can say is, again, what I said earlier in my comments, is that it may look like a simple investigation to people, but the reality is it's quite, any of these investigations is quite involved. We're doing witness canvassing in neighborhoods that can go for blocks, and then we have to revisit that same area because people weren't home when the incident occurred, and they may have seen something. Video canvassing, where we're collecting a significant amount of video to put together a timeline, identify the suspect, where they went, where they were before, and then, of course, when we do go public with the assistance of the media, it's a double-edged sword at times where we're getting information that confirms the identity, or at least leads the investigators in the right direction, but also sometimes misinformation and the wrong identity, or the identity of the individual is incorrect. So the investigators have to take that information. They can't simply ignore it, and they have to disprove it. So it becomes a protracted investigation. So what I can say is these investigations, and I'm not in any way downplaying them, are not complex. They're just involved. And so that's why it's taken as long as it has.
Can you explain, you said there's 6 nearing charge recommendations. Where are the other ones? I mean, what percentage have been dropped? I didn't understand that bit.
29 investigations that that are hate crime based, or we believe that they're vandalism, mischief, assaults, of which 10 are basically concluded at this time, inactive, would probably be a better term.
How were they cleared?
No suspect, no evidence that would be able to put a suspect to the offense.
Have there been any charges?
No formal charges, no. People have been arrested but released, but the investigation's ongoing. So until that investigation is completed in its entirety, then we will go to Crown.
Can you tell us how
So
many
what do you need then? You talk about having only one hate crime dedicated investigator. Do you need to increase investigators in that unit in order to get through all of this information that you say needs to happen before you can get charge approval?
No, it's not so much the hate crime investigator, because the hate crime investigator will be tracking hate crimes and then will direct those particular crimes, whether they're a violent-based crime to robbery assault or property-based crime to our property crime unit, and the hate crime investigator will liaise with those investigators. Could we use more investigators in my division? Certainly. It would
Are
have,
you asking for that?
I believe we have. But the fact is that we have investigators that are conducting these investigations. The hate crimes investigator is assisting, and we're making headway. We've had to put a significant amount of overtime into these investigations just because of the number of them. So we've gone up significantly in terms of the overtime that investigators have had to spend on these investigations.
You're making headway, but there have been no charges in any of these serious alleged crimes.
That's correct. And it brings me back to the riot investigation, when I oversaw the riot investigation where people were concerned that there were no charges. But because we had to complete the investigations for each individual that was subsequently eventually charged and convicted in its entirety before Crown would lay a charge. That's the situation that we face. And this, I'm not being critical of any other, the Crown or the judiciary. It's just the situation that we work within.
So you talk about the efforts that police have put in to try to deal with this rising, disturbing trend right now. What else do you need? What else is it going to take in order to make sure charges get approved where the public is seeing something happening? Like, we're talking about months going by. We've got a bunch of incidents. They keep escalating, and they're not resolved.
No, we are investigating them. We have a great deal of evidence to go through, and it takes time.
You talked about the outreach needed to communities so they feel more comfortable reporting incidents. We know that, as many as 2/3 or more of these hate crimes just don't get reported. Yet some people of color are scared to call 911. They fear escalation in an incident like this. What are you doing to tackle that fear?
That's a good question. I think, Howard, would you like to respond to that?
Sure. Oh, sorry, I was distracted. Can you go again with the question?
People of color are scared sometimes to call the police. They fear it could escalate a situation. What do you say to that? I mean, that
Sure.
speaks to unreporting and underreporting.
And it does. And so when I'm saying that people should speak up and stand up and support, I'm not saying that if the situation is such that it's going to bring harm to yourself, I'm not asking you to do that. I'm asking you to grab a phone, call 911, be a good witness. And just getting back to your question there, Romina, as well, that kind of blends the both, is that that's what the appeal is that we're asking the public, please, if you see something, please, 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 just grab a phone, report, intervene if you can, if you're able. Otherwise, at the very least, let us know so we can come and investigate it. And Deputy Rankin brings up a good point. I mean, we can either do this fast or we can do it right. And it's important to us that we do it right. And that's why it's taking the steps that it takes to investigate this fully and make sure we get strong sentences and strong charges against these individuals.
So what can a member of the public do to help police in terms of evidence? Is video kind of the gold standard for a bystander?
Well, video absolutely will be, and I believe, and I may be speaking for Lawrence here, but in every one of these cases, we've done extensive video canvasses. Everybody knows that anywhere in an urban center like Vancouver, you can't walk half a block without being captured on multiple CCTV cameras. So all of these investigations from an operations level, when we're made aware of it, our members are out there doing an extensive video canvas to make sure we can capture all the information we can. The unfortunate aspect is sometimes you have witnesses that may have seen something but have left and don't follow up with us. So these are all pieces that we're just asking in this case, please get a hold of us so we can further these investigations and put forward a package that's going to find justice for the victims on these trends.
Howard, is when you look at, say, an assault where someone has used racially charged language, how does that work as far as the charge? Is it assault and then the hate crime factor is an aggravating factor, or do you get charged with a hate crime?
Yeah, I'm going to flip that one over to Lawrence. Sorry. He'll give you more specific detail on that.
What we've seen is that the substantive offense of the assault would be the offense, and that the remarks that were made could be aggravating factors should the person be convicted.
And does that increase the chance for a higher sentence? How does that play into the overall?
I don't have that information, but that's the threshold for a hate crime offense, though. A hate crime charge is quite high, but that's not something that we would back away from. We would include all the evidence that was collected in the investigation in the report, and then it would be presented to Crown.
Sorry, can you just touch on how many different police departments have reached out after VPD's gone public for kind of guidance or best practice or help with
Yeah.
managing their own?
Yeah, I don't have those specific numbers or anything like that, but what I do say, this is a broad issue that's being dealt with throughout North America. I was on a conference call with Chief Palmer about a month ago with chiefs from different areas, different major centers across the U.S. and Canada. We were the representative from Canada talking on this same issue. So it is a problem out there. It's something that's associated, related to the pandemic, and we're seeing it in other places across North America, and that's a huge concern. And in Vancouver, because of our large Asian population, we are seeing it, and a lot of it is because of the groundwork, the grassroots work that we've been going out with the community. We've had a number of community meetings where we've discussed this to get our citizens of any ethnic group to report if they come across or are a victim of a hate crime.
So you feel Vancouverites are more apt perhaps to report than other cities?
I think a large part is because of the work that you've done and getting the stories out there. Because the last thing I want to see is that people and our seniors are afraid to go out in the street, worried about going for their daily walk, which I'm hearing anecdotally. And I'm sure when you speak with these community leaders, they're going to tell you some of the concerns. I mean, that's not what we want to see, because that's only going to foster their fears and concerns for their safety and security. So it's so important that we get to the bottom of this from a policing perspective, but as a community, we have to come together and make sure we're supporting, reassuring, and reporting incidents like this. Okay. There's. Oh.
So for those that are on the phone, we asked you now to press *1, as that will put you in the queue for questions.
A broad issue that's being dealt with throughout North America. I was on a conference call with Chief Palmer about a month ago with chiefs of different areas.
There's just a, it sounds like you're talking still. There's just a delay. I don't know what that means. There's one caller. Okay. I can just hear Howard talking right now.
Associated, related to the pandemic, and we're seeing it in other places.
I don't know what that.
I think it's just a delay and it's just playing.
In Vancouver, because of our large Asian population, we are seeing it, and a lot of it is because of the grassroots.
So you haven't pressed. Hi there. Can you state your name and where you're from?
My name is Xiao Zhang. I'm from Vancouver.
Okay, and go ahead with your question.
My question is directed at one of, I believe it's Howard's previous statements about calling only if the call wouldn't put yourself in a situation of danger, but they're asking people to be good witnesses. My question is that how do you respond to situations where calling police directly puts the witness in danger as someone who is racialized?
So if I'm understanding correctly, you're just asking that it may put you in harm's way by being a witness? Is that essentially where you're at?
Sometimes calling the police puts the witness themselves in a situation of danger because the police can in turn target them when they arrive on scene. But sometimes they don't feel safe calling police because they...
I understand, and our officers understand in cases like that. I think it's a good question, that we want to make sure that the witnesses are safe. Our officers will be very discreet, and or it could be a situation where you wait till you get home, but at least give us a call. It's one of those things where, I mean, I don't want to belong to a community where everybody doesn't report this because they're worried about their own, what might happen. I think that it's important that we report crime that's taking place, especially if there's a particular group or individual that's being targeted or victimized. I think it's important that we do that, and there are safeguards in place that we're going to be attuned to.
Yes, I hear that, and I see the approach as one that tries to increase the community's trust in police, but the question is coming from a place of distrust where people have had negative experiences with reporting, calling police, and then haven't been able to hold those officers or police accountable for the ways in which they were treated when they arrived.
No, go ahead, sorry.
Is this question going to be answered just on the phone, or will it also be broadcast on the live screen?
On the live screen. Live stream.
Okay.
Okay.
Would it be possible to pose this question framed in this manner?
I thought I answered it, sorry. So if you're concerned about, like if you're an individual that has had a bad encounter with the police, there's mechanisms, vast amount of mechanisms out there to report that through the independent oversight, civilian oversight, that can look into it. But I really think that even though you've had a bad experience, if you're watching something like this happen, like I would hope that you would still grab a phone and report this, because the beef isn't with the victim that an individual may have. Like, albeit I understand that there are some fears and concerns, but I'm hoping that you would still grab a phone and report incidents like that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Susanna, any other callers? Hi there, go ahead with your question.
Xiao Zhang, he knows that.
Hello.
Hi there, state your name and where you're from.
Yeah, Bob Mack in the Breaker.News.
Hi Bob, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, I wanted to find out about whether the VPD or city officials have looked at other cities for different types of models in interfacing with ethnic communities especially. Brooklyn, New York has dedicated patrol organizations for the Asian, Muslim, and Jewish communities. And I wonder if you were studying the feasibility of such a dedicated community patrol program or system for the Chinese community in Vancouver, or if you feel that the Chinatown Community Police Office is adequate at this time.
Okay. Hi, Bob. It's, yep, good to hear from you. And I would say that this is something that we are doing here. We've got our diversity, Indigenous, inclusive section that looks at all communities, like the Muslim, South Asian, Chinese, Jewish communities, and we have specific individual officers that are dedicated to particular ethnic groups, just given the size of their demographics here in Vancouver. And the Chinese community is one of them, with Inspector Byron Yee, Constable Byron Yee, as well as Constable Janine Tonino, that work in the Chinatown community, but also on a broader spectrum to do with the Greater Vancouver.
What about a dedicated patrol program, perhaps using some of the recruits from the cadets program, an actual organization with infrastructure and with a budget, or connection to a community group? Or are you looking to increase the budget or protect the budget in light of the recent cuts at the Chinatown Community Police Center?
Well, I think the Chinatown Police Center has a cadre of volunteers that are out on a regular basis that's overseen by a police officer. But also, I mean, good question in terms of other capacity, and there is through our community policing officers who are out there, and we've dedicated a number of those resources to Chinatown as a result of the recent incidents. But it's ongoing. Like, we're always looking at the things that are around the corner and what other areas and cities are doing. Quite honestly, I'm not specifically familiar with what's going on in Brooklyn.
Hi there, state your name and where you're from.
Oh, hello, this is Albert. Can I ask something else with Deputy Chow?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so Deputy Chow, can you update us about that 80-year-old lady? Hate crime or just an accident?
Yeah, no, it's a super, and for those that aren't aware of it, I put out a tweet the other day, and it was about an 80-year-old woman. Hasn't been seen by any of the neighbors. She has no family or real close friends that live in the area. And it was her neighbors that called in and said they were concerned for this 80-year-old woman. We got there, housed her enough to be able to faintly call out for help. The door was reinforced steel. They were able to get through it. It was with quite some effort. They did try first and walk, and had been on that couch for, now I've learned, up to 7 days. So she was in a real rough spot. Our partners in the ambulance service got her to medical attention right away. She'll be fine, but it's one of those sad situations. Not related to COVID that I'm aware of anyways, and nothing to do with the hate crime.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi there, state your name and where you're from.
Hi, it's Belle Puri at CBC. A question for Deputy Chow, Deputy Chief Chow. Howard, I'm just wondering, can you address this sort of from a personal perspective? I mean, all the years that you've been on the force, the decades that you've watched Vancouver change and grow and flourish on the world stage. Maybe stepping aside a little bit from being a police officer, what are your thoughts on this personally?
So personally, and thanks for the question. So I was born in Canada. I'm a Canadian Chinese, and I value my heritage on both the Canadian side as well as the Chinese side. I'm first generation here in Canada, and I can tell you that this thing has really upset me. It's been offensive, listening to some of the comments and reading through and knowing all the fine details that obviously those in this room aren't aware of. Some of this hatred that I'm watching and listening to, and I don't want to make it only, even though this press conference is about the Chinese community at this point, but with hate crime, we can fast forward 6 months down the road and it'll be another community. And that's why it's so important that we get behind this and get behind the communities. So it is extremely disturbing. It's disheartening to me, and I can tell you that where the pain goes out is for those that are new immigrants to Canada and having to be exposed to this. Because the benefit that I have is that I've been around the good people and the good communities, and I know that the Chinese community is very well embraced and supported, not only here but across Canada. But for some of those that have just newly landed, I can just imagine what they're thinking and how alienated they must feel. So it is quite a disturbing thing, and this is why it was so important that both Deputy Rankin and myself came up on the podium on this issue. Thank you.
Hi there, state your name and where you're from.
Ian Bailey from the Globe and Mail.
Hi, Ian. Go ahead with your question.
Yeah, to either of the officers, what do you recommend that members of the public intervene when they see some of these incidents? We obviously saw a recent case reported by the transit police where someone suffered a very serious assault while trying to do good and trying to help out some folks who were being harassed. Should members of the public jump into these incidents, hold back? What's your advice to them?
My advice, it's Lawrence Rankin. My advice to the general public is remain at a safe distance. If you have a cell phone, phone 911 right away. If there's a vehicle involved, do your best from a safe distance to get the license plate, the description of the vehicle. If it's just an individual that's on foot, a description as to their clothing, their appearance, their direction of travel if they leave before the police arrive. But by no means do I endorse physically intervening if that places them at their safety at risk.
What about if the victim of the harassment is being assaulted, basically?
Again, it's going to be up to the individual, but I don't want to suggest that the police are telling people to intervene where their safety may be in jeopardy. Then we have two potential victims. Do their best to get other people there to discourage the suspect from continuing the assault, even leaving, and then follow from a safe distance if that's not placing themselves in their safety in jeopardy.
Thank you very much.
Hi there, state your name and where you're from.
Hello, Yuki Chen from Omni News. So for the recent anti-Asian hate crime investigation, what are the chances of leading to a formal charge? As you mentioned earlier that so far no formal charges have been laid. Thanks.
I can't say that what the chances are. What I can say is that we're going to, as Deputy Chow has said, we'll be conducting thorough investigations and submitting a report to Crown Counsel in its entirety. Crown Counsel will then review that and determine if it meets the charge approval threshold for the offense that we're recommending charges against. And that's not to say that even at that point, investigators may be tasked with additional follow-up. But I can't give you a percentage or a likelihood.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. And what about last year? For last year's hate crime investigations, have any led to a formal charge?
I haven't got that information with me. I can certainly look into it and then get back to Public Affairs with that information.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, and I believe Mike has one more question.
Yes, sir. Richmond RCMP got an apology letter from suspects in a verbal assault related to COVID in Steveston. Have you gotten similar letters or talked to suspects in these incidents where they've apologized or?
Yeah, I'm not aware of any, unless you are. No. Yeah, we can find out, but I don't believe so.
That's not an approach that the VP's taking. It seems like Richmond RCMP has dropped the case after getting an apology letter for a verbal assault that was filled with hate.
Well, as the Deputy Chief in charge of the Investigation Division, if it's a file that's before me, my position would be forward all the evidence to Crown, including if the individual provided an apology letter. As a former this is going back a few years ago, as a former polygraph examiner, if a suspect would provide an apology letter during the course of an interview, custodial interview, I would include that apology letter. So that's what we would do.
Okay, and sorry, of the 10 that have been cleared, they are cleared,
They're inactive
they're inactive, okay.
because we don't have a suspect and we have no evidence.
Thanks, and I think is that it? But I just wanted, my apologies, June. I think I called you Jordan as well. So this is Mr. Juning, so I gave you credit twice. So thank you, everybody, for being here. And I do encourage you to speak with the community leaders. I know that they wanted to get their voice heard in terms of what the impact it is having on the seniors and newly landed immigrants and for their voice as well. So thank you.